prioritizing these things is not, and when you break it down to that level, it's not as crazy as it seems. And I do think there's a big misconception that's like, oh, I gotta go do cardio, right? And you gotta like put on the hood and go get on the elliptical for an hour. It's like, it doesn't have to be that way. You can get positive results out of just walking around your neighborhood, add an extra mile a day, and ultimately get the most bang for your buck. So I get the question all the time, how do I burn fat? Or what's the best cardio to do? Or how much cardio should I do? Or something yada, yada, yada around cardio in order to lose weight. And I figured instead of always answering the same thing, because I tend to get very long-winded, I would just put a little episode out here on the cast of the pod. And I want to kind of break down a couple different things because ultimately, and I know this is cliche, but ultimately the biggest piece to you losing weight is going to be your diet. And I know that seems like, okay, well, tell me how to eat or tell me what to eat. And when you break that down, and we'll get into the cardio especially towards the end of this thing and break down the different kinds of cardios, my recommended protocols, and ultimately what is the most effective and maybe what's the most functional for longevity and effective over the duration of your life. Now, to not get too far away from diet, I know that you want the specifics, but again, to be very general, being in a caloric deficit, meaning you are eating less calories than your expenditure, which means the amount of calories that you are burning. That is going to be a huge piece of what you're doing. Now, if you break that down again, you don't want to be only tracking calories because Sally Joe over there will say, hey, well, that means I can just eat 3 Rice Krispie treats and I'll be at 1,600 calories, but I burn 2,000 a day. Well, now we're getting into a different conversation because we are having a far worse health effect on our health by eating just only the Rice Krispie treat diet than we would be to actually eat real foods and be in a caloric surplus. Now, and that may be a very arguable term or theory right there, but in my opinion, if you're going to eat a caloric surplus of real foods and getting the nutrients that you need for your body to function properly and your brain to feel the best, then I would argue that is better to be in a surplus from good foods. Now, that said, it is really hard to do. Now, don't get me wrong. Myself, if I'm going to try to put on weight, I'm always going to eat pretty clean. I'm always going to have lots of protein and lots of veggies and mix in the carbs, which is my grains and my starches. Now, you can gain weight from doing that if you are in a surplus, if you overeat. Now, I'm getting far away from the point. Your diet needs to be made up, especially when you're trying to lose weight, protein. Whether you are trying to build muscle or lose fat, protein is going to be your biggest, and I mean biggest, piece in this whole equation. Why? Well, because the more protein that you eat, not only is protein filled with amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, so obviously they're filled with amino acids, those are going to help you recover and ultimately build the muscle. The more protein you eat, the less you are going to be hungry. So the more satiated you will be, which in turn means you're going to have less cravings, which means you're going to be able to take longer periods of time to not eat throughout the day, right? You've probably heard take 2-hour periods in between eating meals, at least. Now, and that's why the 1 meal a day is pretty good for some people. Now, I don't want to make this whole podcast about dieting, and because I think I can make that a whole podcast in and of itself. And if you have questions, don't hesitate to ask in the comments, and I would love to maybe expand. I know I get long-winded, so that takes me quite a bit of time. But as we go into this podcast, let's talk. So we just covered protein. Well, carbs and fats you're going to need, and you could get with a nutrition coach and see exactly the split of macros that you would need specifically. But for me, and I'm only using myself as an experience here, I know that when I want to lean up, I go higher. Leaning up meaning probably keep more fat off and still build muscle. I'm going super high protein, pretty high fats, and very low to moderate carbs. So I'm talking maybe 150 to 300 grams of carbs. Now, that's not a lot for me at 6'4", 240 pounds. So that said, that kind of takes care of our dieting piece. Be in a caloric deficit and eat real foods, number one, and eat a lot of protein. And having a whey protein shake does not, it counts, but I would say 75 to 80% of your protein needs to come from a lean source. Or if you're a vegetarian, getting it from chickpeas, getting it from beans and rice together and making a complete protein. Or, I am not a vegan, so I can't really speak from experience there, but I do know of higher source proteins in the vegan diet. So that said, let's move on to training. And I want to do a top 5 tips for eating to lose weight and a top 5 tips for training to lose weight. But I'm just going to kind of generalize here and just give you some bullet points. So we just covered eating a little bit. Now, and the main reason for this podcast was to talk about cardio because that's one of the most popular questions I get. But when it comes to training, you cannot spot reduce, meaning, hey, I'm going to pick my lower abs and do one exercise and I'm going to lose weight, right? A sit-up, for example, is going to train your abs just like a bicep curl. The more I stretch my bicep and the more I squeeze it together, the more I'm going to tear it down and it's going to build back up. That's the same thing with your abs. If you're watching on YouTube, your abs expand, the eccentric movement on the sit-up, and then they crunch up. They're building up, not away, right? So that said, that's why you see me doing hanging leg raises. You see me doing pull-throughs. You see me doing high plank pulls. It's utilizing the back, the shoulder stability, core and trunk stability. All kinds of other body parts are incorporated into my core training. A lot of the times, I'm not specifically training just a sit-up. And if I do, I'm probably doing a decline sit-up with some kind of punch and rotational movement. Because the unilateral stuff, the single-sided stuff, is going to help benefit that core midsection. Now, again, we're getting away from the point. When it comes to training, I recommend staying in a 2 to 3 set range with that 15 to 20 rep range. Now, if you can increase weight each set between those 2 or 3 sets, awesome. If not, that's okay. But the goal here is to build muscular endurance, because then once we still start building hypertrophy and building actual muscle, well, muscle then burns fat. And I'll give you the quick data, however people say it. For every 1 pound of muscle that you build, you are burning 50 calories at rest. So let's say, and I always tell people, don't pay attention to the scale, because it's sometimes going to go up before it goes way down. And sometimes people hit plateaus after losing 20 pounds and they're like, wait, now the scale's going back up, and they get really freaked out. But really what's happening is they're putting on muscle. And let's say you put on 10 pounds of muscle. Well, over time, your resting metabolic rate, your RMR or your basal metabolic rate, is going to go up by 500 calories. That means you can sit on the couch eating a bag of chips, hopefully not, a bag of veggie straws, and burn 500 more calories at rest. So, build muscle to burn fat. Muscular endurance, 2 to 3 sets of 15 to 20 reps. I have all those programs on my app if you want to go to that at www.nickwalkerfitness.app. There's plenty there for you. Let's talk about cardio. so I don't talk for 30 minutes. What is the most effective way to burn fat with cardio? Well, if we're being very, very honest, in my opinion, and from what I have done myself and put other clients through, depending on their skill level, depending on their body composition, is high intensity interval training. That is the most effective, right? However, it is the most excruciating and hardest on your joints. The high intensity interval training often involves some kind of mountain climbers or burpees or some kind of very quick, fast twitch muscle fibers that often involve impact, right? Doing some jumping jacks, lots of jumping, or the joints are constantly packing down on the ground, right? When you run, it's a lot of impact. That's why I have lower back issues right now. And it's like, it's something I kind of signed up for, and that's just part of it. But because every time you're hitting that pavement, you are just packing down on the joints, right? That's why it's important to stretch and do mobility and keep up with your, supplements and fish oils and blah, blah, blah. But that said, in my opinion, the most effective in the short term is high intensity interval training. That's why you have the berries boot camps and the orange theories. A lot of that is high intensity stuff. It's predicated on a 2-to-1 work to rest ratio. So you're working for 40 seconds and then you are resting for 20 seconds and you go through kind of a Tabata style workout, right? Now, that is not my preferred method for longevity, for functionality, for feeling good when you're 80 years old. If you want the best protocol, and there's all kinds of research done on this, the best kind of exercise cardio protocol for long term is going to be anywhere from 80 minutes to 120 minutes of aerobic exercise during the week. Now, what does aerobic exercise look like? Oftentimes, that can be biking, that can be walking, that can be walking on the stair stepper. A lot of these research studies have been done on biking. There's literally one, I can't remember the name of the study that I read, but literally they said I think it was all people over the age of 60 were in the study. Riding a bike at 80 minutes per week was right around that threshold of operating for longevity. Now, you're working your cardiovascular system, right? We're talking about cardio. So we're essentially measuring the rate at which, or the efficiency of our blood, or our heart to pump out blood at an efficient rate to keep up with whatever we are doing, right, for our long-term health. Now, with aerobic exercise, that could also be running, right? But that's going to be more impact. So a lot of what people call it will be LISS, L-I-S-S, low intensity, steady state cardio. There's a reason why you don't see bodybuilders doing high intensity interval training. There's a reason why you don't see bodybuilders running. There's a reason why you see bodybuilders on the stair stepper or just walking. A lot of times you'll see a lot of bodybuilders doing incline walks on the treadmill. 15% to kind of lean back. I don't recommend you lean back because then you're basically still leaning, you're holding on to the front of the treadmill and you're basically still walking flat, right? However, all they are trying to do is keep their heart rate in zone 2, and we could get into zones. If you follow me on Snapchat, you probably hear me talk about this all the time with my marathon training. But that zone 2 cardio is going to be, for me, if my max heart rate is 220 minus your age, so I'm 27, 220 minus 27 is 193, so 193 is my max heart rate. Well, at about 60% of that is where I'm aiming for. So at about 140, I believe that's the math, 193 times 0.6 is 115. That's terrible math. 40%. My zone 2 cardio, don't quote me on the percentages here. I don't know why I'm mixing that up. But I was not a math major. I was a health and human performance major. Masters in health and human performance, performance enhancement and coaching, human movement. Anyways, my zone 2 cardio is right in between 135 beats per minute and like 155. Now, sometimes I'm okay with going a little bit higher, but that zone 2 cardio of walking or on being on the Stairmaster or that low intensity steady state, that is going to be the most effective bang for your buck type of cardio to burn fat over the long haul. Now, again, it's not going to give you the most immediate difference in fat loss. However, over the long haul and duration of your life, walking and zone 2 cardio is going to be the best to help you cultivate a healthy lifestyle, right? That's why I harp on 10,000 steps a day and walking every day. Excuse me. And ultimately, I do believe that just the mental benefits that we get from walking as well, and this external stimulus, right? I think it's so important, and I just did a podcast on that as well. But to wrap this thing up, I guess I just want to harp on, and I could go on and on and on about this, but about this whole topic just as a whole, between the training, between the eating, between the cardio. But to answer those questions of what kind of cardio, and if you want to dive into walking even more, I suggest anywhere, pick a number. The average human walks 2 to 3 miles a day. Every mile is about 2,000 steps-ish. And I mean, like for me, I'm always getting 10,000 steps. That's about 5.1 miles for me. Now, if the average human walks, that's on their feet every day, walks 2 to 3 miles, maybe your number is 4,000 steps, and it's about 7,500 steps, or 4 miles. Yeah, maybe your goal is about 4 miles every day, right? So you're just taking one more mile. If you are an average quote unquote human that walks 2 miles every day, that's just one more mile in the morning and 1 mile when you get home from work. That's 40 minutes, 20 minutes per mile at a slow pace, right? So prioritizing these things is not, and when you break it down to that level, it's not as crazy as it seems. And I do think there's a big misconception that's like, oh, I got to go do cardio, right? And you got to like put on the hood and go get on the elliptical for an hour. It's like, it doesn't have to be that way. You can get positive results out of just walking around your neighborhood, add an extra mile a day, and ultimately get the most bang for your buck. So that is what I have for you today. That was only 17 minutes, but I still feel very long-winded, and I still feel like I could keep talking more and more on these subjects. But you know, if there is questions you have, or maybe there's something you want me to expand more on a podcast topic, I would be happy to. If there's guests that there's somebody in the world of social media that you want to have me to have on my podcast that I can reach out to talk about these kind of things that they may be more well-versed, which I would love to have those conversations, right? I'm always open to learning and hearing other perspectives. So if there is guests that maybe other people you follow, let me know in the comments, and I'll be happy to reach out to them and respond to you. So that is all I have for you today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you're the first one to see my videos on the tube with me. I'll see you next time. Have an awesome freaking day, and don't forget to smile.